Okay, time for another video. I was replacing the timing chain in my motorcycle. This chain goes from this cam, this is the cam on the top of the engine. This chain goes down through the head. In the car you'd call it the block, but it goes down through the head and comes out down the bottom here and around these sprockets, and this is the crankshaft. So as the engine is turning, it would turn that chain, which in turn would turn the cam. Now the cam has lobes on it. Here's a lobe, and this is the high point of the lobe, and there's another lobe here that will come around as it turns, and it rocks these rockers that then push down on the valve stem. This is the stem. This is the intake valves. There's two of them for this cylinder, and there's two exhaust valves. So timing of this engine is all about making sure that those valves open and close at the right time. You don't want the valves open when it's trying to fire the compression stroke and make fire to make power, and all of it goes out the open valve. So the valve opens, we get gas and air mixture into the cylinder. It's closed. The cylinder then the piston then compresses the gases, and at the top of that stroke, the spark happens. Boom! It knocks the piston downward, which spins the crankshaft, and then it comes back up and pushes the exhaust out. These valves open here, and the exhaust gets pushed out. That's kind of basically what happens. So I was thinking about cams. There's a picture of it from the top. This is an overhead cam engine, and almost any car that you're driving today is overhead cam. Some of them are dual overhead cams, which simply means they have a separate cam for intake valves and for exhaust valves. On both sides, it might be a V6, could even be a V8. They could have more than two. They could have one valve per. They could have two valves per cylinder, one for exhaust, one for intake, or they could have four valves per cylinder, depending on the engineering of the engine and what they're doing. So the overhead cam engine, you hear often that you have to replace your timing belt. Now this has a chain, but this chain stretched, and it got so that it wasn't any longer doing its job, so I replaced it this morning. I actually made a video and didn't like it, so we're not looking at that. But many cars, especially Japanese cars and smaller engine cars, have a timing belt, a wide rubber belt that you don't see because it's underneath a cover on the front of the engine, and it goes to both sets of cylinders if it's a V6 and makes sure that everything opens and closes at the right time. If that belt stretches or gets slick and no longer has friction on the pulleys, it can slip, and then you can have the piston hitting a valve because the valve is open when it shouldn't be. And so that's why you have to replace those. And it's really fairly expensive job. I've replaced a couple of my own vehicles, but it's not easy. So the point of an overhead cam engine is that it's efficient, it's lighter weight, it can take care of, in modern engines that are now putting out more horsepower for a much smaller engine, it can keep up with it. The difference here is that it's computer operated on a car. I'm trying to explain this and think it through at the same time, sorry. Let's go over here and take a look at this. So this is a 1987 Chevy 5-liter or 302 engine. This does not have overhead cam. Instead, the cam is inside the engine block. This would be the very end of the camshaft. This toothed wheel would be bolted to the end of that. The other down here, I gotta watch what I'm doing. Down here would be where the crankshaft comes out, and it has a small sprocket on it. There's the end of that, but I took the crankshaft out a while ago because it's a good one and I wanted to save it. This engine is just for parts. So as the crankshaft spins, it in turn would spin the camshaft. And the camshaft, just like the one we looked at, only longer, in this case, it will have 16 nodes on it. So as they come up and down, this is called a pushrod engine. As that revolves and those cams come up and down, those little lobes, they cause a rod to move up and down. That rod looks like that, and it sits down on top of the camshaft, and it goes up and down. And in its up and down motion, it makes these rocker arms rock. And as it comes up on this side, it pushes the arm down, which then in turn opens this valve. There's the valve stem. I don't think any of them are loose enough to demonstrate because this engine is pretty nasty. And I just use it for parts. But as it's rotating, they're going to open and close, open and close, open and close. So it's a much sturdier system. You don't really ever have to replace that chain. That chain is big and strong. It's like a motorcycle drive chain. I've had many cars and trucks over the years, and I've never had to do anything with the timing chain. I have had to replace timing belts on a couple of Hondas. So all that takes place inside the engine, and it's a heavier thing. There's a lot more metal involved. It's a little more clunky. It's noisier, but you can adjust the valves and get the noise out of it. It's real easy to work on for someone like me. Not much to it. As the crankshaft turns in an older engine, it also turns the distributor. Some of you people remember distributors and the distributor cap. And when you're having a tune-up, you replace the distributor cap and the rotor. Get that out of the way. There's the rotor. So as the rotor spins around, it's got an electrode on the end of it that then comes in contact with the correct electrode inside this distributor cap. And then that provides the spark that then goes to that spark plug. So we used to have 8 spark plug wires for a V8, and you'd have to check periodically. You might have to replace your wires, and you replace the cap and the rotor, and you can adjust the timing of things by turning the distributor. Well, in today's car, it's all done by computer. You don't have a distributor, and you don't have one coil. Here's a coil. You don't have one coil providing the voltage necessary to spark the spark plugs. Instead, each cylinder has its own coil pack sitting right on top of the spark plug, and each cylinder will have its own fuel injector, because that's called multi-point fuel injection, all handled by the computer. And in this case, this had what was called a throttle body fuel injection system, which is really an electronic carburetor. And thought I had one laying around here somewhere. There it is. So this is a TBI, or throttle body fuel injection system, very early, 87. American cars and trucks didn't have fuel injection really until the 90s. They used this throttle body right up to about 1995 for Fords and Chevys anyway. Each of these are the 2 fuel injectors. They're really simple to rebuild. But I was going to say, as you can see, it's just a carburetor with an electronic squirting valve. But many of you may not know what a carburetor looks like. So that sits on top of the intake and shoots the gas down into the intake manifold, and then it's channeled to each of the cylinders as needed. And all that was done mechanically. The fuel injection system does have a simple, small computer. That's all the computer does in my Blazer, is it just runs that fuel injector system. It doesn't do anything else. It's got O2 sensors. Your newer vehicles, everything's run by the computer, since the computer has to know where the crankshaft is in order to send the spark to the proper cylinder at the proper time. And back with the mechanical distributor, this distributor is attached inside the engine to the crankshaft and would turn in relation to the crankshaft. And that's how we knew when we were getting the spark at the right time in the right place. Now you have crank sensors and you have cam sensors, so that the computer can tell at any given moment where everything is on the engine and when it's supposed to fire. So if you get a misfire in an engine, which recently I had gotten and a friend of mine has gotten in his grandson's car, misfires can be caused by a few different things, but typically they're bad spark plugs or bad coil packs, or clogged or non-working fuel injectors. Any of those 3 things can cause that cylinder to not fire, or not fire when it's supposed to. Anyway, I'm sorry, I went on down a rabbit hole there with that, but I just wanted to talk about cams. And this one is pretty much set. I'll put it back together tomorrow. It's getting late in the day and I'm getting kind of sick of it, honestly, but there's the cam and there's the timing chain. And I've got the new one on and I'll put it back together tomorrow and hopefully I've done everything correctly. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.